All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So I'll go ahead and gavel us in. This is the Assembly's Housing and Homelessness Committee. We are noticed today, Wednesday, January 17th from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. here at City Hall. Let's go ahead and do a round of introductions. First, members in person, and then I'll go to the phone.
Karen Bronga.
Scott Myers.
Felix Rivera, and then on the phone we have Christopher Constant.
Hi there, and I just want to let you know I can only stay through about 11:40.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Constant. And then Randy Solt.
Yeah, Mr. Salt's here, and also I have to leave at noon. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Solt. All right. So first, just apologies for not getting the agenda out in advance for folks for this meeting. Really, today's meeting doesn't have any new agenda items on it, so it should be possibly relatively short. We'll see. For initial audience participation, since I didn't get the agenda out on time, folks probably weren't able to sign up in advance. So at this point, I will go ahead and give two people an individual to participate during initial audience participation if they would like. Otherwise, you can wait until the end of the meeting and participate in final audience participation. So I'll open it up now. Otherwise, just wait till the end. Okay, not seeing anyone, then I'll open it up again during the end. So then moving on to unfinished business, we have two items under unfinished business. The first item is the 2023-2024 Emergency Cold Weather Shelter Plan Implementation Update. I have three specific subtopics here: the 2024 budget need, data reports, and then outcomes. So before we get into those, does the health department want to give just any general update to the committee on this, or do you just want us to go get into it?
Through the chair, I think we'll just get into it and answer questions as they come up.
Cool. All right. So then we'll start with the 2024 budget need. So the Assembly introduced a $2 million appropriation to meet part of the funding needed for emergency cold weather shelter at yesterday's meeting. We're going to be voting on that item next week. The Anchorage Health Department has also stated that they need a total of approximately $3.9 million to fulfill our emergency cold weather shelter needs through April 30th. So members should expect another appropriation in February that meets the rest of the need. I know that there are also some members who are already looking at pushing that deadline for the closure of emergency cold weather shelter back due to the massive amounts of snow that we've had this winter and the possibility that a lot of snow will still be on the ground on April 30th. Folks will remember we did the same last year. We extended a couple of weeks into the middle of May due to snow being on the ground still at the end of April last year. That possibly means some additional funding needed on top of the other funding. So to help the Assembly understand, I think, what the real need is for the remainder of the year, can the Anchorage Health Department talk us through the budget to actual situation we've had so far? I think just putting it another way, what is our burn rate? Are we burning at 100% of the budgeted amount? Are we lower than that? And I think just as a point of reference for everyone, there was almost $1 million in unspent funds for the last emergency cold weather shelter season. So the burn rate definitely wasn't at 100%. And I want to make sure we're getting as close as we actually can to the real number. So does the health department have any information they can share on that?
Through the chair, I can email this out to all members as well. But for the aviator, we had a maximum expenditure of $1.687 million, and we spent $1.609. So you're looking about an $81,000 savings, or leftover remaining balance, I should say. For the Alex Hotel, we had a $604,000 maximum expenditure, and we spent $587. I'm going to switch mics really quick. For congregate shelter, CWS, we had $831,000 and we spent $721. For congregate food, we had a maximum expense of $224,000 and we spent $158. And I'm just rounding these numbers out. There's some cents and dollars left over, but I will send this out. For Alex Hotel food, we had $112,000 and we spent 109. And then for the Aviator Hotel food, we had 295 and we spent 279. And then for third-party oversight, I did just want to flag this. There was $50,000 of alcohol tax appropriated, but it was only for 2023. So there's actually no current funding appropriated for third-party oversight in 2024. And third-party oversight spent $14,285 last year.
Thanks for those numbers. That's really helpful. So looks like our burn rate's not at 100%, but it's not at like 50 or 60%. It's pretty close. Good to know about the third party. So I assume that means that we will need to bring another appropriation to make sure that they are funded for the 2024 part of ECWS.
That is correct.
Okay, got it. Then we'll make sure we do that ASAP. Okay, this is good information to know, and then we'll also get this via email. Any questions on budget need for the remainder of 2024? Well, I should say the 2023-2024 emergency cold weather shelter season. Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Bronco.
Ms. Johnson, can I just ask you to tell me the Alex actual spend again?
For the hotel?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were maximum expenditure 604,000 and we spent 587,651. And I will tell you that, just to preface, actual expenditures for the Alex Hotel, we pay per night per room there per client, whereas at the Aviator we pay for the block of rooms. So the Alex can go up and down, whereas like the Aviator is a set price. I also do want to preface that some of the numbers are lower because some of the contracts didn't start where we thought that they would. And moving forward, the numbers will be much closer to our original estimates.
Thanks, Mr. Constant.
Thank you. So I just wanted to speak to your comment that there are members who are moving toward extending the emergency cold weather shelter season. I'm one of those. There's some been discussion about, do we amend it to the item that was introduced last night that will be heard on the 23rd, or do we do it in February? And the concern about doing it on Tuesday next week or the next meeting would be people get the idea that money is to pay for that extension. So I just want people to understand and reiterate what Ms. Rivera said, that if we do extend the month, which I think we should, then we need to come back and fund if we extend the season next week. We'll have that conversation either next week or in February.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Constant. Good point. All right, any other discussion on budget? Just to reiterate, so next Tuesday, we'll be voting on the $2 million appropriation. I suspect that'll get us through maybe the middle of March. And then we'll have another appropriation in February that we will vote on to get us through the remainder of the season, including the delta between the 2 million and the 3.9 million. So possibly 1.9 million, and then extending, as Mr. Constant has says, through the end of May. So I can't tell you what that'll look like right now, but it'll be more than 1.9 million. So those are the two appropriations that folks should expect next Tuesday and then in February. Okay, then seeing no other discussion on that, let's move on to data reports. So for today's meeting, we have data reports on emergency cold weather shelter from ICA, which manages the AKHMIS system. So if we can get the ICA representatives up here, and then we'll get their presentation up.
Hello, am I good?
Can you bring the mic closer? There you go.
Good?
Yep.
Okay. So we're the Institute for Community Alliances. We serve as the homeless management information system lead for Anchorage, as well as the Balance of State Continuums of Care. So this is a presentation on summary data for all of the ECWS sites combined. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about
Can you
each.
introduce yourself?
Oh
Really
yeah,
quick?
I'm sorry. I'm Kim Seitz with Institute for Community Alliances. So I won't go into each of the projects in great detail because it's not something I've had a chance to review with each of them individually, but kind of go over numbers in total. So looking at utilization rates, I looked at October through December of 22 versus 23. In 22, we had about an 84% utilization rate across the board. 23 was 87% across the board. And then that graph there shows clients served over the course of those 3 months next to each of the months. The blue is people that were new in that month. So in October, everybody was new because they hadn't yet been seen in this period. And then in November and December, it goes down a little bit. Those are the total across total people served in those months. Across the whole combined set of months, we're at about 1,500. So there's a lot of rollover between all of the months. The family shelter brought numbers down just a little bit, just because of the way that family size affects utilization rates against the bed counts that we have. Most of them range from the 80 to 99% utilized within the year, or within those 3 months, I suppose. And then you'll notice that the October numbers this year are quite a bit lower than last year, and I'm suspecting that's because CWS didn't start until a little bit later in October. Questions on that? Okay. So data quality,
And just briefly, for the folks that are on the phone, this presentation is on the committee website. Thanks.
So data quality speaks to how much of the data is actually in there and how accurate are the data elements that are required of each of the projects. So data completeness is just, is the data there? We're at about 88.25% across the board. 4 of the 6 are at 95%. So there's a couple that we will work with in more detail to see if we can bring up that overall percentage or completeness rate. I suppose it's not an average. We do send out their data completeness reports every month to them. So this is not a surprise. Every project gets this every month. They're aware of what their data completeness and their data timeliness is. Data timeliness is a little bit slower. That one I'm not entirely sure what the context is on some of that. 2 of the 6 projects are at a 95% rate for 95% of their enrollments meet the standard. Those 2 projects are the adult-only congregate shelters, and so that makes sense with their workflow because they tend to have more of a live time system, and so overall they're going to do better. I think that part of the pull down is due to the family shelter. They had some staffing turnover at the beginning of the year, so they're getting ramped up now, and I expect these numbers to go up quite a bit in the later part of the year.
A couple questions from
Yeah.
me, and then did you have a question too? Okay, so just to give me a little bit of context, so for the data completeness, does that mean that they have been entered into AKHMIS and that they have a completed CE assessment? Like what does data completeness mean?
So data completeness is the enrollment for the shelter project itself. It's separate from the coordinated entry component of it. And so these are things like, we can only track what's there, right? So if it hasn't been entered, there's nothing I can do to see if it's there or not. So of the enrollments that have been entered, how many of them have all of their required data elements entered? And a couple of components entered accurately. So there's things like, where did you sleep last night? How long were you there? That we can look at a little bit of beyond completeness, look at congruency of those components. And then birthdays, we can look at congruency a little bit farther as well. But for the most part, it's just, did you answer all of the required data elements for the emergency shelter enrollment specifically? Got
it. Do you have like the top like 2 or 3 items that maybe across the board weren't completed?
Yeah, so 4 of the 6 were above 95%. So those ones we're really just not concerned with. That's a pretty excellent rate for emergency shelter. The ones that I think are pulling it down a little bit, it's related to data elements regarding their homeless history, which is a really difficult set of questions to answer. And so we're kind of losing points on congruency of like, hey, these two things don't match up together. And then the other component that we're a little slow on is the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority and the sexual orientation question, which are only required within Alaska. So those are not HUD required elements. Those are elements that the two Alaska Continuum of Care have decided should be required of everybody at every enrollment.
Got it. And then the second question I had on, just to give me a little bit of context on the data timeliness, what's the metric that we're using?
How long it takes to enter the data from when the enrollment actually happened. So on the back end, there's a date that says this data was entered today, but it's for an enrollment that was 4 days ago. And so that's within 5 days. That's going to meet the threshold. It'll be counted as good to go.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bronga?
The is that 6 locations? I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah,
just a little
this-
lost. So,
yeah, this includes 6 projects.
so I've got Aviator, Alex, CWS. What else is?
BFS, so Brother Francis Shelter, Family Emergency Cold Weather Shelter through Christian Health Associates, and the Covenant House Overflow. So project start, project exit are a little low. It's something we need to dig in with each provider to get a better sense of kind of what's slowing things down there. I anticipate that the coming months will get better just because staff has really figured things out at this point. So this is just a quick static shot of demographics for the 3 months. There's nothing surprising here. American Indian, Alaska Native, Indigenous is overrepresented. These race ethnicity percentages do count people in each of the race categories they identified as. So your percentage overall will be over 100% if somebody identified in multiple categories. That race ethnicity is really similar to the overall system, Anchorage system. I will say that the Black African American or African representation in this data set is about 3% lower than the system overall, and that 3% almost directly correlates to the American Indian, Alaska Native difference from the system overall as well. This is very similar to the breakdown for last year's projects. There's very little change. Yeah, there's not a lot more to say about this. It's not surprising. So this gets to the coordinated entry component. 62.5% of the clients that were active October through December also were active in coordinated entry in the same enrollment. We found that the average length of stay in all of the sites combined is 30 days. So this feels a little bit low if people are really staying that long. But it's not something we've had time to really dig into with the providers themselves. And that's something I would like to explore with them and ACEH before we give more details on this particular topic. Okay, exits. So in total, there was 1,509 people that were both enrolled and sheltered. I say enrolled and sheltered because of the way that the workflow operates. It's kind of like when a kid enrolls in school. They're enrolled in school and then they're marked as present each day. And so that many people had both of those things, which is part of the data quality component of just making sure that the pieces that need to be there are there. So 519 of them have exited and did not re-enroll within that period. I can't tell you they haven't re-enrolled since, but within that period, they haven't re-enrolled. Overall, the exit destination is generally unknown. We expect that for emergency shelter because somebody will leave in the morning and they won't come back, and that's all you can say. There's not a lot to be known with that. We expect to see more exit destination information in services only or navigation projects that are supplementing the shelters. So I know Henning has stood up navigation projects for each of their sites, and I expect that those navigation projects will have better exit information moving forward, but the shelters themselves, this is not unexpected. There were 434 people that exited got that exit destination, and then subsequently re-enrolled in one of the sites. This could just be people that moved from one facility to the other, could be people that left, they were gone for more than 14 days, which is the impetus to then exit them. And then they showed back up. Of those destinations, 93% of them were either to a literal destination, so a literal homelessness destination, or an unknown destination. So they're not people that are being housed and coming back.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any questions on this report? Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Bronga.
So the rescue mission, they're not part of HMIS or?
They do not enter into HMIS, and I don't know if they're getting these particular ECWS funds either. Anyways, and so I didn't include them. Well, I can't include them because they're not in HMIS.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess since you brought that up, Ms. Bronga, there are two entities, right, who provide services who aren't in HMIS. That's the Rescue Gospel Mission and then the Downtown Hope Center. Is that accurate?
To my knowledge in this moment, yes.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
that's everybody.
Just to put that in
Yep.
context. So most people are in
Most people are.
HMIS, but I
Yeah.
think those two aren't. Okay. Any other questions for ICA? Great. This is helpful for me from just a general systems. How is ECWS doing? How is it being utilized? Some of the demographics information is helpful. And then, yeah, the exits is also interesting. And actually, I did have a question here. What's the definition of literal homelessness?
The HUD definition is in emergency shelter or in a place not meant for habitation.
So in that, can we go back a slide, Travis? Thanks. So when it says that 12.5% of clients exited literal homelessness, how is that different from permanent housing, temporary housing?
So literal homelessness is going to be people that exited either to the streets, to a different emergency shelter, or to a
okay.
hotel motel paid for with emergency shelter vouchers. And then permanent housing is going to be people that end up with a lease in their name.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Okay, then thank you so much for
Yep.
providing that. Hopefully, we will get a similar report probably in April or so, maybe May, whenever we're done, so that we can see that again. Thank you. Okay, so then next item on our agenda for ECWS is outcomes. So as I've been saying since day one here, one of my guiding metrics for success of emergency cold weather shelter, and we made a policy decision around it, is how well that we are connecting people to housing and support. So I'm wondering if the health department or the operator can speak to those.
Through the chair, I can compile some exit housing data for December. I did report on October and November at the last Housing and Homelessness Committee meeting. But as you spoke about yesterday at the assembly meeting, the special meeting, we've had 17 exits to housing through the Next Step initiative, and those people have been stably housed. And there is a plan to house an additional 30 people this week.
Is that at the Barrett, if I may?
Through the chair, that's just what the coalition had told me, that there was plans to move 30 people into permanent housing. And so I don't
I like
know
it.
where that is, but I just know the number.
Wonderful. And then as you are putting together the numbers, the most recent numbers, do you have any sense, and does the operator keep track of support? So are people asking for and are people obtaining supports for mental health, substance misuse, any of those particular issues? Do we have any sense of that?
Through the chair, I'm unsure about the October and November numbers. I do know that with Next Step being fully funded and signing their agreement for case management with the coalition, that plan for anyone housed out of the Alex moving through that system will have the supports necessary. But I can get you a compilation of data for October and November housing.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and I think for me, going into the future, it would be helpful to understand both next steps. So people who are going to be moving out of emergency cold weather shelter and into permanent housing, what kind of supports that they are accessing, and then the people who are remaining in emergency cold weather shelter, what kind of supports that they are accessing. To me, I see that as sort of two separate populations. Would be good to get a handle of, and maybe the coalition can just take responsibility for the next step part, but the operator and the health department would be good for people who are in ECWS to get a handle of that, because for me, I want to know how many people are asking for these supports, and are they able to access them? And if not, what are some of the roadblocks so that we can really start hopefully addressing those roadblocks and taking down those barriers, whether they're governmental bureaucratic barriers, whether it's institutional barriers that are outside of governments that are providing roadblocks, whatever those may be. Because for me, one of the things, again, emergency cold weather shelter is not supposed to be just a warehouse. We're supposed to be helping people try to get to their next destination, which our goal is housing. But for other individuals, they may have a different goal, and I want to make sure we're achieving those goals. I'll just, since I don't understand what your text means, I'll go to you, Mr. Constant. And I also want to note for the record that member Brawley
sorry.
just joined us.
Thanks. The air went dead there for about a minute. I couldn't figure out what it was.
Oh, okay. Got it. I read that as one word, as in deadline, but thanks. Okay, any discussion on outcomes? Anything else that folks want in terms of outcomes? Great. Well, then hopefully next month in February, we'll be able to delve into that a little bit more. Any other general discussion on emergency cold weather shelter implementation? Yeah, go ahead, Member Brawley.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize, I missed the first part of the meeting, so I'll go back and watch the recording. So also apologies if this is duplicative. But I know you mentioned the 2024 budget need. I just want to say my intention, and I've been talking to others, is a couple others, is to find a way to extend emergency cold weather shelter through the end of May. So understanding there's an additional budget need, also understanding that it may be kind of a phase down where it's not the total number of rooms that we have now in space, but it might decrease. So I just wanted to say that, knowing that we don't have all of the funding identified yet. And so I guess my initial question is just, has the health department been talking about that, or are there initial thoughts on what that would look like, other than the fact that there would need to be contracts extended?
Yeah, through the chair to Ms. Brawley, we have talked about the long-term goals of CWS specifically, not the emergency cold weather shelter plan extending in its entirety. I think we're open to having that discussion, especially with the high levels of snowfall that we've seen this year. We really don't want to see clients exiting to snowy streets. So yeah, we definitely want to have that conversation, and we can bring forward a budget request for that as well.
Yeah, and I think this might have already been covered, so I'll just, again, watch the recording. But just to note that I think part of that will be not overshooting on how much money we need. And so that's where I think we'll need close monitoring of the spend down, and especially as folks are able to exit, hopefully to housing, right, so that we don't have everybody by May 30th in that shelter. But anyway, just to say that's something to keep working on.
Yeah, thanks. And Ms. Johnson did walk us through the budget to spend, and I think she's going to email it to us, so you'll see it later. Yeah, and I guess just, okay, I'll go to you, Member Bronga, in a minute, but yeah, it would be helpful if the health department could approach Alex and Aviator just to get their sense of, are they interested in extending to the end of May, or do they have other plans? So that we can put that into our planning as we consider all of this. Member Bronga?
I went to listen in on a few of the town halls, and I'm just wondering, and looked at the report from RRS, and just wondering, like, a few of them seem pretty simple, like the slippery ramp outside of the Aviator. And is there ever a report on, they say these things need to get done? Is anything happening there? For instance, at the CWS, there was talk about a lot of drug activity in the area, and some of the clients said how hard they were working on trying to stay away from it. And I just wondered if there's any update on how things are going. There was also, at the time that the last time I went to one of the town halls, a feeling that there wasn't a lot of group like a AA meeting kind of thing, activities to involve the clients in, to try to, just, it was really kind of heartwarming. The one lady said, "We just need activities. We got to get our minds off the drugs and alcohol." And I was wondering if more activities have started there, and just how the interplay with RRS's reports are, and activities changing.
Through the chair to Ms. Braga, I'll try and address each question. So the first question was, if there's an incident like a ramp, is there a resolve? An icy ramp, is there a resolve? So we do file incident reports where a client will call and say, "Hey, the ramp is icy." It will be filled out in a report, and then it will be sent to the health department and to Henning, and then Henning will follow up with a resolve report. And so we have those internal reports. Some things are still under investigation. If there's client issues with staff or client to client issues, sometimes those take a little bit longer to resolve, but something as simple as an icy ramp usually gets resolved within the hour. As far as drugs, infiltrating our city, that's something that we should always be actively trying to work on. We do know that we have a bad batch of drugs that have hit the streets. And we have done awareness campaigns at the 3 sites. I know that RRS was working with Aviator staff to host an event to let people know, carry Narcan, make sure someone knows what you're up to, kind of engaging in that, educational component. It's not something that we can stop, day one, but just educating clients and letting them know that there is something dangerous is important to us. And that's something that we've been, advocating for and doing. As far as, what was your third question? Oh, events. Yes. So we do have NA meetings and AA meetings. I do know that there's some sober events that are happening around town. That's something that we have on site at some of the locations. I don't know if there is additional extracurriculars. I know that there's like worship night or Bible study happening at some of the facilities, but I don't know of anything like bingo or trivia night. Those are things that we had talked about, but I don't know if they're actively happening right now on those sites.
Thanks. And for the members, I think it was right before this meeting, RRS did send in their weekly report to us. It is on the committee website, so I would suggest that folks take a look at it. There are some interesting things in the report that you might want to take a look at. All right, anything else on ECWS before we move on? Okay, then we're going to talk about still ECWS, but the transition out of emergency cold weather shelter. So I mentioned this on the dais yesterday, but as a reminder and for folks listening, I wanted to do a quick rundown of the post ECWS season as I see it. Big caveat, as I see it right now. So right now there are 574 beds at ECWS, at least the 3 primary locations, the Alex Hotel, Aviator Hotel, and the cold weather shelter. I'm not really including the other beds in this analysis. So that's 574 beds. And then the estimates that I have heard say that there are currently between 200 to 300 unsheltered individuals. For my part, I'm really hoping that those folks are staying warm. So in total, we are talking about a population of between 774 and 874 individuals who would be unsheltered on April 30th or May 31st, depending on the policy decisions that we make in the end and the utilization of shelter as the weather gets warmer. Thankfully, I think we've already taken some steps, and as I keep saying, pulling some levers to address this. We expect roughly 30 to 40 units, housing units to come online through the work we funded with the Anchorage Affordable Housing and Land Trust's work on vacant and abandoned properties. Through the Next Step pilot program, 150 individuals should be housed by April 30th. Everything goes smoothly with the transitional shelter pilot program work. I imagine that will help an additional 20 to 30 individuals. We'll see. And then depending on the policy decision that we make, as well as possible usage of the facility, cold weather shelter could provide shelter for another 150 people during the summer, possibly. A lot of ifs on that one. So obviously, if you add up all of those numbers, that doesn't come close to the need. So right now, I'm estimating that there will be between 400 to 500 individuals who will remain unsheltered this next summer. I think as we get closer to April 30th, we'll probably have a more fine-tuned number. But for now, that's the number as I see it. That's sort of good news and bad news, right? Good news is that number is much smaller than the unsheltered population last summer, which means that some of the things that we're doing are actually working or will be working over the next several months to get people out of an unsheltered stance and into permanent housing or a transitional shelter. Bad news is that that's still a large number that is going to have impacts on our community. So at this point, I don't have any new ideas to bring to the table to lower the number of unsheltered individuals even more. So to me, that means sort of one of two things, and maybe even a combination of the both. One, we either need some new ideas that we could implement by this summer, and I'm not sure if the administration or the health department has anything in the hopper that they are considering, to continue to lower that number of unsheltered individuals. Or two, we need to just come to the realization that the situation is what it is, that we are going to have 400 to 500 unsheltered individuals this summer, and shift our focus to making sure that we are ready to mitigate the issues, provide the supports, and then hopefully keep doing that work of housing individuals. I know the Next Step pilot program is exactly that. It's a pilot program that'll run through the end of the emergency cold weather shelter season. But there may be an opportunity to continue that work if this body so supports it. And that might be another avenue for us to explore. But I think it's too early to really make that kind of determination. So I'd love to get feedback from both the administration and the members on what I've just outlined and sort of see where folks are on the transition out of emergency cold weather shelter. Is there anything else that we can be thinking of? And then for those individuals who are going to remain unsheltered, because I've been pretty blunt with my constituents, I don't see any way that we're not going to have an unsheltered population this summer. Like, we are going to have an unsheltered population. The question is how big that unsheltered population is, and what are we going to do to mitigate issues and support folks who are unsheltered. So would love to get just any initial takes that folks have or feedback that folks have on what I've outlined. I'll start with the health department, and then if members want to speak to it.
Yeah, through the chair to the body, I think your numbers are quite accurate. I would probably add an additional 100 people for people that we haven't accounted for. I do know that in winter months, we have a subpopulation that will self-resolve with either, couch surfing or staying with family members or friends when it's cold in the winter. But usually in summer, they forego that and then go to the street. So I would account for an additional 100. I do know that we have been working with the Parks and Rec department to bring forward an appropriation for campsite mitigation. I do know that there's also questions of how large do we allow for camps. We really do not want to see a repeat of Third and Ingra last year, the size of the camp, the problems that came with it and such. But I think your numbers are pretty accurate. I would add an additional 100 just to be safe. But I think continuation of the CWS facility for 150 to up to 200 would be a request that we have. And then of course, bringing on new housing units, whether that's through hotel conversions or new development. We really do need new units within the city. It's just what we need. And so I'm going to continue to advocate for that as well. Thanks.
Great, thanks. So I'll go ahead and go to the members, starting with Member Brawley.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate thinking ahead. I think it is true that we will have unsheltered folks. So I'm glad that message is already getting out. And I think just to note, that's not new to this summer or to COVID. I remember the summer of 2011 when I moved here, I saw folks camping along the Ship Creek Trail as it was back then. So I think just to, again, remind the community that this is something that has been occurring. And I think it's the scale. And then, of course, the growing sense of the need. That's really what we're trying to grapple with. So yeah, I certainly support continuing some form of shelter, emergency shelter, knowing that is what the community needs. Ideally, I think we find a better solution in private operators long-term and not just continuing to use the solid waste building, because we know that's not the long-term use of that facility planned, and there's other opportunities. So yeah, I guess I don't have specific ideas to offer. I do think focusing on housing, I guess I'm looking at it from the funding perspective, which is, that we anticipate, potentially with unspent funds and how everything shakes out, we may have some additional one-time money to invest. And that's a great thing to do for housing and hotel conversions like we've done, because they are not things that we are operating, but we're helping contribute to the capital cost of that. I think the real trick is figuring out that operating money. And I know that's going to be a challenge for shelter. It's going to be a challenge for any kind of housing or other programs that we continue to support. And then I also want to note, in addition to the cold weather shelter, we are providing operating support through alcohol tax to things like complex care shelter and beyond what is currently in our budget. So that is something we'll be taking up at first quarter. And I certainly support continuing those programs because they are effective. Another thing to note that we'll need to figure out is the Golden Lion, because of course we have that 2025 deadline for it to, in theory, become treatment, whatever that looks like. And so, or we have to dispose of the building, or actually I think we have to pay it back. So that's certainly also a deadline we don't want to lose sight of. So anyway, all that to say, I wish I had more concrete ideas to put on the table, but I think we know what some of the challenges are and we can really characterize the challenges. And so I think as we move forward through the budgeting process as well, that's something I want to keep looking at.
Thanks. Member Myers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think it's important to realize that there are a percentage of the folks that are homeless that just choose to be homeless and not go to a shelter. Do you have any idea how a percentage of that you've seen through the data that's been collected? When Member Solt and I went and toured several of the camps last fall, we spoke to a lot of them who didn't want to go to a Third and Ingress site or to the Navigation Center, to the Sullivan Arena. So I think it's important to realize that. So hopefully we can get some laws changed that bring our parks back to what they were intended for the use and enjoyment of the residents and the citizens and children to play in. So,
and through the chair to Ms. Brawley, I will tell you that I believe it will come up at the legislative committee meeting in about an hour, but we are going down to Juneau to ask for funding for year-round shelter. And I do know that there is a specific ask to keep CWS continuing and use of some of those funds. So that's one thing. Secondly, to Mr. Myers, yes, we do have some policy things that are that we're working on right now with members of the coalition to hopefully bring some support, because we do know that there is an unsheltered population that will be hitting the streets. We would like to have clear and concise guidelines for the clients to know, where are the best places if you are going to camp, where you're not going to be abated every week and moved around, and really solidify where in the city allowable use in camping, and cars and inoperable cars and parking lots have been a discussion for us as well for people who are car camping. I think you'll see a lot of those details ironed out in the coming weeks.
Thanks. Member Braga?
I'm kind of going to dovetail on what Mr. Myers said, but I think we all are tolerant of someone in a bad situation, but the illegal activity in the park, it just can't be tolerated this summer. The cutting of trees, the fires, the drug sales, the public inebriation, the building of shelters, the discharge of firearms, and making it just the trash and making it an unhealthy place for the children and other residents of Anchorage to be at. I hope that we can do this continuation of CWS. I am really hoping that I know Mr. Rivera did some work on having councils identify an area in their council that they would tolerate some allowed camping. And I feel like a lot of councils did throw out a place. I would like to see that it's organized. If we can't release the shelters with the tent and the sleeping bag and go be free and have people all over the city. I think there needs to be some organization so we can have facilities available, the restrooms, otherwise the dumpsters, otherwise it's going to be a mess. And the last thing I'm going to say is I know that I got jumped all over on this before, but I do think that a fee could help. There are people that are camping at Cuddy that have funds. They've emailed me. They want to put their motorhome somewhere. That's how they want to live, and they are willing to pay something. I don't think we can assume that everybody that's camping is destitute. They maybe don't have enough money for rent in this city the way it is, but they might contribute to an allowed camping situation, and that could be pretty helpful.
Through the chair to Ms. Branga, I think you're absolutely correct. We have a lot of work going on behind the scenes that we're not yet ready to move forward with, but I think in the coming weeks, you'll start to see some progress on organized camps, how we manage those camps, and what campsite mitigation looks like, to include trash, because I heard the comment. One thing that has been tossed around, and it's maybe something that you guys would be interested in exploring, is a park ranger type situation. With the police having vacancies right now, and people saying, oh, well, we just need to put police officers on it. We really do have a shortage of officers. And so I think having some sort of, policing at a park ranger level would be something we could possibly explore. Just something to think about.
Thank you. Member Constant?
Thank you. I just want to speak. And can you turn off your microphones? It's echoing pretty bad. Is that okay? Okay, that's better. So I just want to speak to a few things that I just heard. One, I do support the idea of a peace officer, which is effectively the park ranger in our code, how it would operate. Also, Mr. Meyer spoke about the idea that there are people that him and Mr. Salt spoke to that said they wouldn't go to Sullivan Arena or Third and Ingra. And that actually doesn't speak to an individual who says, I'm going to stay camping for the rest of my life. There may be a very small number of those people, but the reality that someone says, I don't want to go to Third and Ingra doesn't speak at all to where they want to go, because the reality is Third and Ingra or Centennial Park the year before, they were hives of trouble. They were unmitigated. They were devastating, horrible places to be. Nobody would want to be there. And so that is not a fair benchmark to establish the kind of parameter around the number of people who want to go here, there, or wherever. And I think great care is in order in how we approach the question of moving people. And I do support strongly the idea of inserting management when there is chaos and ensuring that things don't get set up too big in any one place, because that's just deeply immoral. And the argument that the court is going to solve this problem, if the court does grant the ability for the municipality to move people willy-nilly, then we have a whole other set of problems to address. And I won't even start to get into the humanity side issues of where that could lead. But the Trail of Tears was a thing. You can't simply tell people you don't have to go home that you don't have, but you can't stay here. We as a public entity will have to face the reality no matter what comes from the Supreme Court.
Mr. Constant, you're breaking up a little bit. Can you repeat that last part?
About just that no matter what the court does, we will have to grab sheltered people in a market where you can't afford to live. And so I, for one, will not become a German from 1940s in order to remove people from our parks.
Thank you. Next, I have myself in the queue, and then Member Brawley. The updates from the health department and the administration. When about do you expect that we will hear a little bit more on a couple of things? One, on the appropriation that you're working with Parks and Rec on of mitigation. When do you think that'll be something the assembly sees?
Yeah, through the chair. I believe I have first or for the Housing and Homelessness Committee meeting in February.
Great. And then is it in February where you're also going to talk a little bit more about your plans for, and I just want to be very careful on the verbiage that we're using. So there's sanctioned camps, allowed camps, organized camps. The term that you used is organized camps. Is that the terminology that the health department is using? And can you just sort of define that a little bit?
Yeah, through the chair. So I think what you guys are going to see coming forward is really defining an encampment and putting public health requirements around sizes of encampments. And so what constitutes putting a bathroom somewhere? What puts a dumpster somewhere? Where can people camp in the city? Where can they not? You know, one of the things that we saw last year is people were setting up in playgrounds or near school playgrounds. That's just not something that we should be allowing within our city. You know, we shouldn't have to choose between our clients and children in our neighborhood. So there should be a basic outline of where an allowable camp, because we know people will camp because we do not have adequate shelter in our city or adequate housing. And so we really need to establish a guideline and codify it. And I think when we come forward, it would be.
Member Cross, thank you for joining us. If you can please mute yourself. Thanks.
Sorry. I was waiting on an interjection. So what I think you'll see is you'll start to see the code really robust itself in saying, like, where can we disallow camps, so that therefore showing where we can allow a camp and what constitutes an encampment and what constitutes public health and safety within those encampments. I wouldn't say it's, you know, an organized camp or an allowable camp or a sanctioned camp. It's really just where are we going to disallow camping, and therefore acknowledging where camping is allowed under Martin versus Boise and Grants Pass.
Thanks. Next, I have actually, you've already spoken on this, so I'll go to Member Cross and then back to Member Brawley.
Thank you. Yeah. So about 3 months ago, there was a meeting on the second floor regarding the individuals who were camping at Davis Park, and it was with the snow storage. I don't know if you guys recall that. And essentially what happened was, because we had a really early snowfall, we needed places to put snow. We were attempting to help relocate some individuals that were camping at the snow dump. They were near where heavy equipment was. And so we actually got them together and we met here at City Hall. And there was probably about 7 or 8 of the individuals who were camping there. And we offered them everything. We offered to help move their items, establish them in a better, safe place and everything. And this is what is interesting. They just refused. They said, we've been here. We consider this our home. We refuse to leave. We don't want to go to any of the shelters because we recognize that here we can, you know, they said, we admit that we have substance abuse problems. And so we can basically use these substances without enforcement, which we can't do at any of the shelters. So we are going to leave here. And one of the gentlemen honestly said, he goes, you will have to take the National Guard to remove me from this property. I ain't going. And then they stormed out. And, you know, I kind of felt like we were being held hostage. And so, you know, I don't know what we do about that, because that is a very real situation.
They're individuals who are intentionally camping, intentionally breaking laws. They realize what it is. They, at the same time, they recognize that they have a problem, but they refuse to move themselves from the snow dump. Just period, flat. Even though we offered to move them across the street into a different area of Davis Park, offered to move their stuff, make sure they had a nice, they just said no. They said, there's other people over there that we don't like, and we're very territorial. And this is the whole part of it, I think, just gets glossed over. And that's, unless we enforce our laws, I don't know what happens. Basically, they just took public property or private, they took municipal property that actually it's military property that we're leasing, right? So it's military property that municipality leases for snow storage. So, and they just moved onto it and then refused to go, even when we offered them shelter and offered them other options. And that's the issue I think a lot of us a lot of people are concerned with. And that's the population that we're going to be constantly dealing with. So I understand Constance's situation where we don't want to seem cruel and heartless, but you do realize that those individuals can also be cruel and heartless to the rest. And we have to decide if how much of that we're willing to tolerate. Thank you.
Through the chair to Mr. Cross, this is Alexis. I do want to say that there will be discussions in the coming weeks about public access and especially municipality operations. I do know that we had some people that we had to move off of a job site that the municipality was engaging in within a park. And so that question becomes, can you abate people when it impedes municipal operations? And so that's a discussion that we'll be taking up as well.
Great. Thanks. Member Brawley?
Yeah, thank you. Just 3 additional comments. First, I'm glad, Ms. Johnson, you brought up safe car camping. I think that's really important to figure out. And I know there was some back and forth about that this summer. And I know I've heard from a couple folks in my district who just, have people parking on the street because they don't have anywhere else to go. And so I think it would help mitigate or prevent conflicts with neighbors if folks know where they can park safely, and especially if they are working and living out of their car, that they know their car is going to be there when they get back, or that they have a place to park. So I think that's really important. And I think we can look to other cities that have been facing that reality as well, that, people are living in vehicles. And so I would urge you to look at what other cities are doing to make that possible. The second thing is the park ranger idea. It called to mind, there was something maybe 6 or so years ago now, I want to say 2017, 2018, somebody had brought the idea of it wasn't a ranger exactly, but it was some kind of park ambassador. And I think they did have peace officer. Anyway, so I would encourage looking back at that because I know we often have conversations that come up every 5 or 6 years. So I'm open to that idea, but I remember there were some current concerns raised last time. So I think looking back at those is helpful because I imagine the same ones will come up again. And then lastly, I'll just note, because I know we've had this conversation in multiple contexts, solving our housing affordability issues is an entire continuum. And so there's the folks that we need to help now or that need to afford housing, and also the bigger picture of things like zoning reform and building code reform. And so just to note, I know there's concerns sometimes, why are you talking about market rate housing when we have these needs? And it's not an either or. Especially as we look at another summer of short-term rentals and folks who get displaced from their rental for some months of the year because functionally they don't have year-round housing. And then we have, of course, our seasonal worker needs. So just knowing that there's all these dynamics. And so just to remind the community again, for those that are not tracking the direct connection between all these things, that is, again, why we're talking about housing, not because we're going to be building necessarily units for the folks who need housing right now and are unhoused, but because all of it is the big picture market and helps for that flexibility and moving around. So thank you.
Thanks. All right. Yeah, go ahead, Member Bronco.
I did bring up the park ranger idea to Daryl Evans, and I really thought it would just be easy, but there's a lot of stickiness there. Like, would they need to have the same pay scale as a police officer, and if they were doing the same sort of duties? So make sure you reach out to them. They did like the idea, but it's stickier than it seems.
Just for context for the public and people listening, you mean Daryl Evans with APDEA?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks. Sorry.
And through the chair to Ms. Branga, when we first approached this idea, that was the number one concern, is that the CBA didn't allow for people to do police-like work outside of the police union.
All right, not seeing any further discussion on the transition out of emergency cold weather shelter. Thanks for that. That was a good dialogue, and we'll continue talking about this and hopefully having some action steps that we can take as a body on the transition out of ECWS. So look forward to that in February and beyond. So we don't have anything under new business. Moving on to the Assembly's Housing Action Plan. So I just want to spend a little bit of time here talking about the housing action plan topics that I want to start delving into at this committee and get everyone's feedback. Primarily, can we go ahead and put up the housing action plan, please? Oh, and I don't know if any legislative staff are listening to this, but it would be helpful if we got the final approved housing action plan on the Anchorage Housing Action website, because the latest version that's on there is still a draft version. So thank you, legislative staff. Quick pause while I look up the correct document URL. All right, so Travis, you should have it in your email now. While Travis is getting that pulled up, just for timing purposes, although I suspect we'll have plenty of time, how many folks in the audience wanted to participate in final audience participation? I have one individual. Okay, got it. Great. All right, it's up on the site now. All right, so if we can go to page 12, please. Great. If you can scroll down a little bit so that D, there you go. Up a little bit more. There you go. All right, so primarily, I'd like this committee to focus on strategies D, E, and F. So I'm going to just run through each of those and then like feedback from the members. So under strategy D, which is the strategy to focus on incentives and public investment to increase housing stock, I'd like this committee to focus on 3 items in there. One, continue the investments in vacant and abandoned properties for housing. I will just caveat that I'm not exactly sure how much CEDC is doing on this. I know in September, Mr. Martinez and I jointly led that effort to get the funding for vacant and abandoned properties, but that's something that I feel comfortable that this committee spearheading that. Then Second, enact any code changes needed to support innovative housing models such as community land trusts. And then third, increase local control of federal housing dollars. Explore a creation of an Anchorage housing authority. So those are the three items under strategy D that I'm interested in exploring in this committee. Can we scroll down to E, please? So under strategy E, I'm interested, which is expanding housing accessibility and stability. I'd like to focus on items 1 through 9. I don't mind tackling item 10 as well, but if we can scroll down to show what 10 is. But I don't know if CEDC might be more hands-on with Girdwood. I'd have to talk to them. If they are pretty hands-on with Girdwood issues, then I'm fine with CEDC tackling number 10. Then under strategy F, if we can scroll down to that one, streamlining the municipal processes. I'd like to focus on 2 items under that one, under this committee. One is the creating the housing dashboard and tracking municipal investments in housing and how units are performing. And then 2, broadening community engagement and involvement in housing policy. So those are the, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 items in the housing action plan under each of those strategies that I'd like this committee to focus on. Doesn't mean that there might not be additional ones, but those are the ones that I think are most tailored really to this committee and its work. Any feedback from members on that? And I guess before I go to the members, essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to put those items under that section of the agenda, under the housing action plan, and then we'll start tackling each of those items as we can, and figure out how we as a committee and we as a body want to tackle those items. So, any discussion from members? Yeah, go ahead, Member Brawley.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think when we were talking about this the last few months, we wanted to make sure that this plan has a home or a couple different homes, right? So one of them is really related to land use policy, which fits within community economic development. But I think there's a lot of additional work. So I would agree with your assessment. And then in terms of a lot of the work under, I think it was E, the affordability strategy, I think a lot of that also needs to be work with the assembly and partners. So, talking with folks working with landlords, and I know there's a lot of other organizations doing that. So I think that's really, at least in my mind, one way that we can start implementing some of those strategies is to really collaborate, and whether it's funding or whether there are code changes needed or whatever needs to happen. I think that's a good way to focus. And then on the dashboard as well, I think that will need to be collaboration with CEDC for sure, but I think that does need a home. And I think this committee makes sense because the goal was to be holistic in how we're measuring our progress.
Great, thanks. Any other feedback from members? All right, great. So then, next month, I think you'll see that included in the agenda, and we'll start tackling those items. Next on our agenda, Assembly Legislative and Budget Priorities. Those are all, the items listed under there are all 2023 holdovers. I believe most of these have been accomplished in some form. So you'll see probably in February, after the Assembly has approved the 2024 priorities, you'll see an updated list that will include the 2024 Assembly Legislative and Budget Priorities for this committee. So that's it for that one. Then we'll move over to final audience participation. So if we can get a mic set up. So you'll come sit in this chair here. We'll put a timer on the screen for you of 3 minutes. So if you can just hold until we get that timer set up. Great, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Rivera and members of the Assembly. My name is Terry Bookie. I am a project manager with Sala Medical. Sala took over as a service provider for the Anchorage Safety Center and Anchorage Safety Patrol in October of 2023. Additionally, we do work with the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness for the outreach programs that they do throughout the community. providing medical outreach services and such. I wanted to thank you guys for your thoughtful and diligent conversations regarding the homelessness problem in the municipality, and just introduce ourselves to the committee. So thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. Hopefully you've also introduced yourself to the Health Policy Committee, because they're very interested in your work too. Great, thank you. I don't see anyone in the queue for you. Would anyone else like to participate? Yeah, go ahead.
Actually was invited here by Denise. My name's Tom Layden. Told me about what's going on here, and I was at the assembly meeting last night. I have different properties around town. I'm a landlord that might be able to help whoever. I mean, I just don't know who really to connect with right now. I mean, I have quite a few units. Some are vacant, some are remodeled, some I was actually going to sell. So I think you guys got a lot of great ideas. You know, I mean, she was talking about that parking situation. I'm actually trying to acquire a place right now that really kind of fits a lot of different things. But I think that what the assembly needs to work on is land use, because a lot of stuff, B3s and everything like that, has been taken up, and all the big tracks have been taken up by all these marijuana operations. So really only in I1s and different things. So it's really hard to get any kind of good track or any kind of good B3 property or even industrial. I think there's only a few industrial lots out there for sale right now in the bowl. And actually, I got one tied up right now that would actually work, but it doesn't zone for it, because I talked to Dave at planning about a week ago, and he said, well, Tom, the problem is I think it's a great idea, but zoning doesn't allow it. They don't allow housing on it in the I1 district. And I think that if the particular property I'm talking about, it's in the Mountain View area, but it's perfect for everything, but it doesn't qualify. So I was talking to Denise briefly, and she loved the location. And then we started talking about my rentals that I got. And I was actually, you know, I'm older, so I'm winding down a little bit, but I have a lot of stuff that I could make work for the homeless or, you know, people that are in need. But I'm not going to lie. I mean, for instance, I remember I did a place a long time ago, beautiful, everything maxed out, perfect. And somebody got in there in 30 days, they destroyed a $30,000 remodel. This was a long, long time ago. But they were all on the best behavior for the first 5 minutes till they got into the unit and destroyed it. I was disgusted about that. So I did change some of how I did my improvements, you know, based on that really, really bad experience. But I've got a brand new unit right there by the Boys and Girls Club, a duplex, a 3-bedroom and a 4-bedroom. One side needs to be redone. The 4-bedroom is ready. It's been vacant for 3 years. I really haven't been trying to sell it because to rent it, I was thinking about selling it. But a beautiful unit. But I'm scared that if I was to make a deal with somebody, you know, what happens to my unit, you know, in 90 days or 120 days? I mean, I put well over $100,000 into that unit, you know, new roof, insulation, new kitchen, bathrooms. I mean, it's like brand new, you know, egress windows. So, I mean, I'm all about trying to help the community. But then again, I was at the municipality yesterday, and I was at the hearing, and the one lady that she came at the very end, which was very hard to understand her at the time. She's like, well, I had a renter in there. They didn't pay the rent. They got a voucher. They don't pay. They paid their half. Then we don't get the rest of the money. So what happens to the landlord that, yeah, we got a voucher, but they're not paying their share? You know, how does that all work? You know what I'm saying? Where, you know, I mean, I don't get a discount on my property taxes because somebody doesn't pay me. I still got to pay a mortgage. I still got to pay property taxes, insurance, water, sewer. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues here that, you know, really need to be addressed. And
Yeah.
I'm saying that, hey, you know, I'm
Thank
about
you.
talking to whoever that
Sure.
want to talk to me. I'm easy to get a hold of.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much. I would suggest, if you want to talk to folks about the Next Step Initiative pilot program, which deals with a lot of the issues that you're talking about, you can either talk to the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness, which I don't know if they have a representative here, or the health departments. They're all working in collaboration on it.
I was kind of like, she was doing some housing or something like that. I didn't know she was involved in that. Kind of maybe I need to talk to her. You know, I didn't know if, you know, if you have a card or something like that. It seems like that's what you do.
Yeah,
From what I see.
we can connect right after this meeting. But
Okay.
there is a member of Henning staff here who is the working kind of as a liaison for
Right.
matching eligible units with clients.
I understand that. I'm just new to me. I'm just kind of getting the feel for it. I'm a fast learner though.
Well, welcome. We can
Okay.
talk right after this meeting.
All right, thank you.
Great. Would anyone else like to participate? All right. Do we have anyone on the phone, possibly? Members of the public on the phone? Okay, great. Well then, I don't have anything under committee discussion unless someone wants to bring something up. All right, not hearing any, then we will go ahead and adjourn a little early. We haven't done that in forever. We're adjourned.